Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here for the first team selector of 2025. It's the game against Crystal Palace on Saturday afternoon at Selhurst Park. Chelsea aiming to avoid defeat for the third time in a row, get back to winning ways for the first time in 3 games. Our last Premier League win coming right in terms of like the calendar, it hasn't been that long, but that Brentford game does feel a while ago in terms of like tone and mood since the Everton game, the Fulham game, and obviously the Ipswich game. So for Enzo Maresca, I think this is a huge game. Now, when I say that, that's not to try and be hyperbolic and reactionary and infer that somehow this game is the most defining game for Chelsea this season, because obviously it's not. We're still only in January. However, I think for the mood and I think for the way Chelsea's season could go, I really think it's imperative, and I think this is a reasonable thing to ask, is for Chelsea, they need to get back on track very quickly, because teams below them are starting to pick up points. Most notably, Newcastle United have really picked up some form, but even the likes of Man City, you feel like will click into gear eventually. So for the main objective of this season, has been the main objective since the start, is to qualify for the Champions League. That is still within Chelsea's control. Now, I think there are some big conversations to be had around Chelsea's personnel. And now, because we're in the January transfer window, there's one position in particular that may be the big narrative over the course of this month, whether Chelsea are going to act, or in my opinion, and maybe the opinion of others, have to act based on some injury news and updates we've got today from Enzo Maresca. So as always on Team Selector, we'll look at Enzo Maresca's press conference, we'll look at the team news, we'll look at Crystal Palace, the opponent, and then I'll give you my thoughts as we head into the predicted lineup. As always, please do give me your lineups in the comments below and your thoughts ahead of this game. Also, I just want to quickly say, as it's 2025, going to be doing some new stuff on the channel and the podcast this year. I'm planning to start properly a morning show. To start off, I think we're going to do 3 days a week during midweek, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, a morning show. We're going to start off pre-recorded. It may eventually turn to live, but I wanted to do a morning show. We trialed it last year. I enjoyed doing it. I want to do it a lot more regularly. Morning Blue. So let me know your thoughts if you'd be excited for that, if you want to see more of that, a morning show where we react to the previous evening's news, we look ahead, all of that good stuff, and whether maybe your morning commute, that could be a thing you either watch on YouTube or listen to on the podcast feed. So the big news from Enzo Maresca's press conference is undeniably the injury update about Wesley Fofana. We believe that when Fofana went down injured against Aston Villa, it was a hamstring injury, so you usually anticipate at least a month. But that has dragged on. And it's got so extreme that today Enzo Maresca came out and inferred and kind of suggested that Fofana's season might be done. He may not be back this season, which is staggering. But we are talking about a player who has suffered a lot of injuries even before joining Chelsea. But if we look at his Chelsea career so far, has suffered a lot of injuries. He did not play a minute last season. He suffered at least one injury, if I remember, in his first season at Chelsea that kept him out for several months. And of course, this year, he's only made it to December. This is a problem on several fronts for Enzo Maresca. Fofana and Colwell are his 2 outstanding defenders. They were his 2 first-choice defenders. They have been this season. Fofana on his own is an issue because, listen, you can talk about circumstances about players' injuries. Good luck, bad management, misfortune. Could they have been managed in a different way? Could those players have done different things that meant they avoided injury a bit more? It's a similar conversation that we have about Reece James. Though I'm always a big believer that we look at the reality of a situation. And the harsh reality of the situation, no matter how we got here, is that Wesley Fofana has suffered a lot of injuries in a short period of time. Whether you think calling him injury prone is a little bit unfair, the undeniable reality is he is someone that suffers a lot of injuries. I don't know how else to categorize that. So there's that front, right? How can Fofana get through this? Because he's a guy like Reece James who's picking up a lot of injuries in a short period of time. The other problem, the major problem for Maresca right now, is his backup options are not brilliant. We're going to get to that in Team Selector and look at my team and how I think you rectify that. But for the short and long term, I've stressed this a number of times this season. I do not think the backup options for Enzo Maresca in his defence are good enough. I don't think Axel Disasi is good enough. I haven't been overly convinced by Tosin Adarabioyo. I thought it was a mistake during the summer to loan out Trevor Chalobah to Crystal Palace. So I think the big narrative and conversation this month is whether Chelsea are going to act in the transfer window, and where I think they will only be able to act and only maybe should act is at centre-back. Are they going to be forced, if Fofana's injury concerns are as bad as Maresca is kind of suggesting, to go out and sign someone who they may have planned to sign in the summer? I think the obvious one, ironically, is owned by the team we're about to play, and that is Mark Guehi. Mark Guehi, I think, would be a brilliant option for Chelsea to sign. It's one of my predictions for 2025 is Chelsea sign Mark Guehi, and it may come to fruition this month where he returns to the club, because we've talked about centre-back being an area that you need to address already, but also because of that lack of depth, I think quality depth in that area already, you have real concerns. Anselmino has returned. Maresca spoke about him. He's a very young player. Maybe he gets some minutes against Morecambe in the FA Cup. However, it's very hard to judge whether he would be ready to make that jump up to the first team. And if you're looking to seriously compete, if you're looking to seriously upgrade a key position, Guehi is the serious option. He's not the only one out there, obviously, but I think mid-season signings, a Premier League ready, Premier League proven, someone who I think would very quickly adapt and come back to the club where he developed and grew as a player. But, I think January signings are risky. I think you need to be pretty certain if you make a massive move in January that player can adapt and very much impact your team quickly, because that is what Guehi would be. If he moved this month to Chelsea, if you signed a first team defender right now, he is coming in and instantly going into that first team. So a lot for Chelsea to talk about, but I'm not comfortable for the rest of this season unless Tosin and Disasi radically transform their form between now and May, that is a good enough defence to keep Chelsea going. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe you disagree. Crystal Palace are not doing great at the moment, and maybe that hinders Chelsea's approach for Mark Guehi. If Crystal Palace weren't 15th in the table, didn't have some fears about relegation, maybe that move could be easier. However, just again on Guehi, his contract situation is one that seems like it's coming to an inevitable conclusion where he is going to leave Selhurst Park, and maybe selling him now gets them a bigger fee than they will get in the summer. But Oliver Glasner obviously steadied the ship after Roy Hodgson left and, kept them up, played some exciting football, to be fair to them. This season, it hasn't quite worked out that way. They've had some decent results. I mean, they did draw to Man City. They've had some all right wins, but it's been very difficult for them to find a consistent run of form. They're playing kind of a three-back system. Trevor Chalobah obviously played a lot, won't be playing against his parent club tomorrow. Munoz, I think, as a wing-back has been a very important player for them, and I think they've missed him when he hasn't been available. And obviously up top, Ismail Assar, who they bought from Watford, has been a really key addition to them. He's their top scorer this year. I think he's got real good speed, direct, wide player, and seems to have adapted very quickly to Premier League football on a more consistent basis. And of course, Eze remains kind of that flair player after the departures of Michael Olise and Wilfried Zaha. And of course, Eze scored the equaliser against Chelsea back in August in the reverse fixture. And Jean-Philippe Mateta, alright, hasn't pulled up the same trees as last year, but I still think can be quite an effective front man, especially to play off those kind of wider threats, which is kind of what Palace has kind of instinctively, is what their identity has always been. They've very much possessed really good wide or inside forwards, and then it's having kind of that focal point who can very much service those players. So Chelsea walk into this game knowing that I think Palace are going to sit deep. They're going to look to frustrate Chelsea, as recent teams have. And it's whether Maresca and Chelsea can counteract that, because recent results and performances have alerted us to some of the flaws within the squad, and also maybe encouraged opposition that there is a lot to get out with this Chelsea team, especially when they don't have their best options. Now, I think for Maresca, he needs to go back to what he was doing earlier in the season. I want to see the proactive, more fearless coach that I think that has really gained Maresca a lot of credit. And I feel like some selection choices here are unlikely, but I think would aid him, not only in terms of actually looking at the team and going, okay, I understand that choice. I think would help him in terms of quality of the first team, but also maybe start to look at other ways Chelsea are going to attack teams. Because the fear has been also over the past week that maybe Chelsea are being found out a little. The game moves so quickly. What is the next evolution of Maresca's Chelsea this season? And I do have an answer for that. He hasn't really tried it at all this year. And because this guy hasn't really been tried properly in the Premier League for Chelsea this season, I think now is the time to do it. If you're going to do it any time before the guy eventually moves from Stamford Bridge. Robert Sanchez will start in goal. Jorgensen conceded 2 the other night. I don't think that's going to change Maresca's mind, who's first choice at the moment. The first big thing is I think Josh Achimpong should start here. Malo Gusto hasn't been playing well. Reece James, it's a real unknown how ready he is to play Premier League football. I mean, that's the big thing with Reece. It's, do you throw him in? Do you not throw him in? Is he ready to start? I mean, that is something that is very hard to speculate at the moment. So I think Josh, they made such a big play of him signing this new contract and him staying at the club and him getting first team football. Now's the time to start to develop him, because if he becomes a regular, if he becomes a player that is useful to Enzo Maresca, it's a cliche, but it really does become a new signing. It becomes a player that is really beneficial to Maresca. And I feel like in a game that, I don't want Disasi playing. That was a flaw of Maresca. It was a massive mistake of Maresca the other night. He shouldn't have made it, and I think it cost him. Can't be making that mistake again. Malo Gusto, I think, needs the competition because his performances just simply haven't been good enough recently to justify starting. And because there's Reece James injury issues and fitness maybe concerns, Achimpong, I think, is the right player to start here, and hopefully he could perform to the level if he's given the opportunity. I do think Tosin starts this game. He needs to radically improve his performances. I thought, maybe he gets away with it because Disasi's mistake led to the second goal, but his defending at times was really bad. He's had some good moments in a Chelsea shirt, but if Fofana's injury is bad and Chelsea do not sign a new centre-back, I feel like Tosin is kind of the first choice here to kind of take Fofana's place. He really needs to step up his performances in the second half of the season. Levi and Cucurella make up the back four for me. Enzo and Caicedo, I think you stick with that midfield two. That was another thing that Maresca spoke about. Romeo Lavia, here we talk about another player who has kind of concerning injury issues. So I think Enzo and Caicedo remain the first choice midfield. Then we get into the attack. I don't think he's going to do this. I would shift Palmer over to the right with the license to move centrally. Christopher Nkunku is the 10. Jadon Sancho on the left. And Nicholas Jackson up top. Nkunku and Jackson have not played together really at all this season. In any way that you think could get the best out of Christopher Nkunku. Obviously now we're in January. There's a lot of conversation about whether Nkunku is going to remain at Chelsea. I think it's going to take something pretty extreme for him to leave the club this window. I could see it obviously happening in the summer if his situation doesn't change. I think it would be a crime if Chelsea do not try to make Nkunku work, at least for a period of time. If it doesn't work, you move back to what was working before, and hopefully we can click into gear with the previous attack and Palmer plays as number 10 and you've got two natural wide players. I know that's Maresca's system. However, I think Maresca has also been very good at looking at his squad. Some of the best things and the things I've credited Maresca for most at Chelsea so far is, I think, appreciating the talent he has at his disposal and maybe adapting to that. Jackson hasn't been playing amazingly well, but I think that he still is kind of the first choice striker. Mark Guehi probably is thinking to himself, why can't I get more of a shout here, even though he's a very raw player. Especially if we get to a situation against Palace again where you're looking at the subs bench and Maresca is not acting. I think that's going to be very interesting. Noni Bedawake too. Maybe feels like he could respond in a big way, but he got an opportunity against Ipswich and sadly didn't take it. Pedro Neto too. There's a lot of attacking options, and I think that it is relevant to point out for some, context that Chelsea are still, I think, joint second top scorers in the Premier League. The attack has been more positive than negative this year. However, after a bad run of form, I think it's important that Maresca maybe adjusts where things haven't been working out. And I feel like Nkunku and Jackson and Palmer getting those three players on the pitch could be quite exciting. I think if Maresca isn't willing to shift Palmer or kind of adjust his system where Nkunku's playing kind of as a second forward rather than as a left winger, there's kind of no point doing it. If that's his idea, I would just play a natural winger in that role personally, because I just think it's a bit of a waste, which then would lead inevitably to Nkunku leaving Chelsea. That's my opinion. I think I am being a little bit wild with this team selection. Josh Palmer, I don't think so, but I think it's more likely that Palmer plays as 10, you get 2 natural wide players, and we stick with what we've done so far this season, which, to be fair, Maresca can, I know we've had a bad week, but Maresca can kind of turn around and go, well, it got me to this point. I just need to maybe tweak a few things and some players get back to form, and we're back to where we were a month ago, which I don't think is a ridiculous stance to take. So that is my team, the first predicted lineup of 2025. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.